I had a very prominent financial advisor on yesterday who is fluid in Bitcoin, a believer, and basically said, Angelo, you wouldn't believe how many millennials I have, whether relatively poor, middle class, or richer, where their investment portfolio, he said it with a little tongue in cheek, is Bitcoin and Tesla. And I said to myself, I didn't have the guts to mention it to him, given that they have a long time horizon, I'm not so sure that's a bad idea. Obviously, he implied they need more diversity. And in theory, they do. I get it. But if they have a 30, 40, 50-year time horizon, I'm not so sure that right now, that was the worst thing I ever heard.
You know, it reminds me of a decade ago. I wrote a book called The Mobile Wave. And the mobile wave is all about how Apple, Amazon, Facebook, Google are going to launch billion-user digital networks and dematerialize mobile devices, retail, news, information, etc. And I bought a bunch of Apple stock and I bought a bunch of Amazon stock back before it went up by a factor of 20. And all of these conventional money managers on Wall Street, they would all, hedge funds paying, charging 2 and 20, they would all try to give me advice. And their advice was, well, Amazon keeps going up. You might want to diversify out of that and buy some other retailers. And my answer is, well, 15, and you can find this on YouTube, I'm on the record, 15,000 companies are going to get destroyed by Amazon. There's only going to be one winner. And so if your diversification is selling the winner to buy the losers. And so people, you can put on a suit and a tie and you can say, I've been in the business 30 years and I'm protecting your money. But if your advice to the millennial is sell the winner to buy the losers, you're destroying their wealth. And the same is true with Apple. People would literally say with a straight face back in 2012, well, every time Apple doubles, we're going to sell half of it, and we're going to buy other computer companies. Well, you're going to buy IBM and HP and Dell Computer. And the problem with that is Apple's going to dematerialize all of them, and pretty soon they'll all be destroyed. They're going to zero. We got to the point where Apple was 150% of the earnings of the entire mobile phone industry, right? Which means that they made money and the collective sum of every other company in the industry lost half as much as they made. And it's not a complicated idea. In the digital world, if I can launch a network which will go to 1 billion people that can actually deliver them a product for a nickel over the weekend, that's like the most powerful thing in the history of mankind for creating economic value. You're going to diversify out of that. You're going to sell your Facebook, Google, Amazon, and Apple so you can buy a diversified portfolio of non-technology, traditional 20th century companies. And that's the same issue right now. I mean, the reason that the money managers are wrong to put 2% of their portfolio in Bitcoin is because they're investing 98% of their portfolio in wealth destroying fiat derivatives, right? It's like you're back in Argentina. I'm telling you that the peso is going to devalue by a factor of 100 against the dollar. So the dollar, look at the blue dollar rate against the peso. It went from 1 to 1 till it bought 4 pesos, and then 8, and then 16, and then 30. When the dollar buys 30 pesos, you're going to sell half of your dollars to buy back into the peso, because then it went to 60, and then it went to 120, and then it went to 150. And the fundamental thing you're missing is if you're owning an investment which is derived based upon existing cash or the expectation of future cash flows, and if the currency is losing 20% or 15% of its economic power every year, you're just selling the winner to buy the loser, and you're putting increasing amounts of your portfolio into something going to zero. And it's hopeless, right? I mean, it literally is hopeless. I own the domain name hope.com, HOPE. I bought it about 20 years ago. I waited for something to do with it. Well, I found something with Bitcoin. Bitcoin is hope. If you go to hope.com, you'll see all of our materials, all of our research, all of my videos on Bitcoin. Those millennials that are buying Bitcoin are buying hope. And when they're buying Tesla, they're buying hope. And if you're buying a diversified portfolio of companies in Zimbabwe or Venezuela, it's hopeless.
I'm still getting questions in. I guess apparently people have a lot of kids in high school going to college or college graduating. I'll try to combine that one question. What would be one bit of advice? And I think you hinted at some already, but I'm going to ask it anyway. For someone graduating high school, about to enter college and afraid of what the future looks like, and someone who now isn't going to have the luxury of sitting back in college, and I hate to phrase it that way, but now out into quote unquote the real world. Is it relatively the same or very different? What would your advice be?
Well, my first observation would be YouTube has uploaded millions of hours of useful stuff. You can learn anything on YouTube. If your kid didn't go to college, you know, all they need is discipline and access to a computer and the internet, and they can learn it all online for free. The lectures that I took at MIT in physics are uploaded to my website. I have a free academy called the Saylor Academy, SAYLOR.org. And the mission of that organization is a nonprofit. It's just to give away education for free to everybody in the world forever. And you can get a computer science degree or a physics degree, and you can learn all this stuff. It's all free. And when you go online and you get to the physics class, the professor that taught me physics at MIT in 1983, he's teaching for free online on that web, and it's a better experience. My family's life savings for 200 years were obliterated in the first 6 weeks at MIT, listening to those classes in a lecture hall with 400 people. Or you could just keep your money and go online and you could listen to the same lectures. And he's talking about like Newtonian physics. It's 300-year-old stuff. I mean, Isaac Newton wrote Principia Mathematica hundreds of years ago. It's 99.9% of all the math you're ever going to need. Why is there a copyright on this stuff? Why is someone going to charge you $250,000 to learn calculus? It hasn't changed in 300 years. It should be free. It is free. So bottom line is you can learn stuff if you have the discipline. If you go to college, fine, you go to college. I mean, to a certain extent, sometimes they hold you back as opposed to speed you up nowadays, because, you know, if I'm watching the video, I can watch at my own speed on my own time frame. When I went to MIT, I had to show up 3 lectures a week, sit in a hall with 500 people and listen at their time frame, sitting in the back of the room, 50 rows away. So I wouldn't obsess over that. I think that degrees will get less important over time. I do think my other advice to any family, though, worried about the future is, look, there's a digital transformation. Here are the things that matter. Being able to code matters. Write software, being able to create software products. If you want to create products, then software engineering matters. You can learn to code with a $500 laptop for free online if you want, but that's one discipline. The second, if you're not a computer scientist, then a data scientist. Being statistically sophisticated matters. Learn how to evaluate information and figure out what information is useful, what isn't. So if I was going for a technical discipline, I'd look at one of those two. If I wanted to be non-technical, what matters is being able to communicate. Mm-hmm. Right? So if you can't code, then you need to be able to communicate. And the importance of communication has exploded by orders of magnitude ever since we got to this modern podcasting era. Like the world needs people that are very articulate, that can communicate some useful insight and upload it to the universe. So you should learn to communicate clearly, concisely, coherently, focus on learning a discipline or a skill, and then find a way to communicate that thing. And then my last observation is, In addition to the digital transformation of the world, which says communications and coding are really important, there's a digital transformation of balance sheets. And the single biggest truth in the world is that 7.8 billion people are using toxic currency to store their value. And what they need to do is convert their treasuries from a toxic currency, which is losing 15% or more of its economic energy every year, to a perfected safe haven asset, of which the best in the world is Bitcoin. So convert your family treasury to Bitcoin, convert your personal treasury to Bitcoin, convert your company to Bitcoin. If you have an endowment, convert that to Bitcoin. If you run a city, convert that to Bitcoin. It's a very simple idea, which is you have the strongest asset in the world. You can't make any more of it. One day, billions of people will want to own it. They've all got to squeeze through this one nozzle. Every day you can buy $1 billion, $2 billion of it. It's a bank in cyberspace. If you're holding $1 million in cash, you're losing 150,000 a year, or you lost 250,000 this year in purchasing power. It's just melting away. And so everybody on earth needs to figure out, how do I convert or digitally transform my balance sheet from something which is debasing to something which is accreting? And once you understand that idea, then it becomes pretty clear what else you want to do with your life, because there's a million other things that follow from it, that'll keep you busy once you get that big idea.